Hello there everyone. If you are new here, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch, and if you've been here before, welcome back. Super happy to have you here with me today in the high tunnel, which is starting to look a little bit jungle-like, which is what we're here to fix today. I'm going to be topping my tomato plants, so that literally means going along and cutting the tops off my tomato plants. We'll talk about why when we get to that point. We are also going to be building a little bit of a trellis to go along my peppers. As you can see, they're starting to get weighed down by all their beautiful fruit and falling into the aisle. We are also going to pick some peppers and pickle some peppers because there is nothing as delicious on a pizza or a good sandwich than some pickled peppers. This is what I call the maintained YouTube worthy side of my high tunnel. It's not really that, except that this is the area that I usually do work when I'm going to share a video on a specific thing that I do in my high tunnel to maintain it. And this side over here, the side of my high tunnel that gets a little bit more neglected. Look at that. It is an absolute jungle back there. I would like to be able to say that this is an unusual event in my high tunnel, but the evidence would speak against that because if you look back on videos from the end of July, beginning of August, since I put this high tunnel here, was it 5 years ago? I think it was around 5 years ago now. You would see that at least once every single summer, this is how my high tunnel looks. So obviously we have some work to do over here. Before we get into doing that and dealing with those tomatoes, I do want to deal with the peppers because it is quite hot in here, which you can probably tell by the sweat beading on my nose and my face turning red. And this is something that I need to take care of because if I don't, the branches on the pepper plants are quite fragile and they could break under the weight of all of the fruit. So I do want to get this job done first. And should we have time and I not get too hot, then we will do the pruning over on that side. We will definitely go along and top everything though, because that is something that I do need to get done, regardless of how hot it gets in here. But the actual trellising up of the tomato plants on the other side might wait until tonight. One of my sons made me all of these stakes that I am going to use along these plants. I'm not going to use a stake for every single pepper plant because I think I have 130 or something like that pepper plants in here, so that would be a lot of stakes. But what I am going to do is hammer these stakes in so that they're nice and sturdy. And I got him to make me 8 stakes, so we're going to put 8 down each side. Now we will nail them all in. Let's flip that one over. Now I'm going to take some yarn, and you want a yarn that's fairly strong for this, or some kind of twine, and I'm going to run, I think 3 lines, maybe 2, we'll see, all the way along, and that will help hold everything up. And my son did such a nice job of making these. I think I'll probably just leave them in here instead of taking them out and reuse them again next year, because I do plant my peppers here each year. It is recommended, of course, to rotate your crops as best you can, but in a closed environment where you have limited space, like in a high tunnel like this, it's a little bit difficult to do. And I have these permanent trellises that I have set up for my tomatoes here, and I've been planting these all in the same spot for the last couple of years, and it's been working fine. The biggest thing you have to do if you're not going to rotate is to make sure that you feed the soil whatever nutrients that plant that you're planting in it is going to need, because they will become depleted over time. I've shared this before, but I have a thing for fences. I just love any type of fence. So even this, I like the contained feeling of a fence, and this makes me really happy. So now we're going to head over to this side where we're going to deal with some of these unruly tomato plants here and top our tomato plants. It takes generally between 20 and 30 days from the point of flowering to until you get a mature sized tomato, and then it can take, depending on again the kind, from between 10 and 30 days for that plant to reach full ripening stage on the vine. So a lot of people, especially if you live in a really hot climate where the chance of your tomatoes cracking or ending up with severe blight or anything like that, it's recommended to take the tomatoes off the vine when they just go to the point where they're just starting to get a little bit of a blush on them, and then you can ripen them inside. We do the same thing here in the north, except at the very end of the season, we push the tomatoes on the plant for as long as we possibly can, and then we pull all those green tomatoes off and ripen the rest of those in the house. And I find that if I take all my tomatoes, let's see, by the end of August, first to second week of September, depending on how warm it is. If I take all my tomatoes off, they've all gotten far enough along in the ripening process that they'll ripen the rest of the way inside. But I like to avoid ripening tomatoes inside as best I can because I don't have a lot of counter space or table space or any other type of surface for doing that. So keeping that in mind, and whether you want to make the decision to top your tomato plants or not is going to depend how many frost-free days left you have in the season. So we're looking at around, let's say if we're really going to push it, middle of September. If I'm able to keep heaters going in here and keep the nighttime temperatures warm enough and we don't end up getting some random hard frost. We always get light frosts even by the beginning of September, sometimes even the end of August, but the high tunnel protects the tomatoes from that. But anything harder than that, harder than a light frost, I need to pull my plants out. So I'm looking at the amount of time we have left between now and then, which let's see is going to put us at 30 on the short end, 45 on the long end days left, which doesn't give us a ton of time to have tomatoes from this stage, which is flowering, to actually having tomatoes that we can pull in off the vine. So it makes sense at this point to go along and remove any of the flowers that I know are not going to have time to produce fruit. If I have any, like this right here where I have some little tiny tomatoes forming, they still have the flower end on them. Those ones are probably going to have enough time, especially because this particular variety is a plum size variety, so it's going to have enough time. There may potentially be enough time, these ones are sun golds, for these flowers here that are actually, there's little tiny tomato plants. Let's pull that off here. Sorry, tomatoes, not tomato plants. Let me show you. There's a little itty bitty fruit. Can you see that in there? That may have time to mature on this. So I'm going to leave the cherries because I hardly got any cherries. Oh my gosh, it's hot. I hardly got any cherries at all, cherry tomatoes at all this year. So I'm going to let this one go because why not? So this is kind of the interesting thing about what happened with my tomatoes this year, is that I ended up with fruit forming along the very bottom. So the situation was perfectly ripe, I guess you could say, for good flower production and good pollination right along the bottom. And then the second rung up on the plants, all these ones are for the most part beefsteak style tomatoes along here. They were able to also flower and produce fruit at the right time. But anywhere above that, so probably about this much of the plant itself, didn't even flower. So something happened during the temperature of the growth of the plant along there that was not ideal for flowering, and actually flowering, because they didn't even flower. They didn't even try to flower and then not get pollinated. They actually just didn't flower at all. And then I'm having another flush of flowers along the very tops of the plants. It's so interesting to observe these kinds of things in the garden because I find that I learn a lot about the ideal conditions for plants by observing when they don't do well. I can look back, of course, on this season and see our wild temperature fluctuations, the fact that we didn't even start getting any heat until this last week. Lots of heat now, though. And so that obviously played a big part in what these tomatoes did. So I have to admit to being a little bit sad to go along and lop off the potential of this plant to produce these plants to produce any more fruit. But truth is, they're just not going to form they're not going to have enough time on the very top there. So some of these plants, like these ones here, are well over 6 feet tall, probably 7 feet tall at least up there. So there's lots of beautiful growth happening, but unfortunately we're going to cut it off. And you know what? It is much cooler on this side of the high tunnel, so I am going to start. Well, that's exciting. Look, we have cucumbers. Yay! Look at that. These are Socrates, which is a great northern variety of slicing cucumbers. My very favorite way to eat cucumbers, well, there's two. I love a good Greek salad, but I also love a peanut butter and fresh cucumber sandwich with a little bit of salt. If you've not had it, please try. If you love peanut butter and you love cucumbers, the combination is amazing. Okay, so these ones here aren't actually too bad, but these ones way too tall. And I have some yarn, so I'm going to go along and trellis up anything that needs to be tied back. Like this enthusiastic one here. So let's go top. I was just looking at these plants and I was thinking about the fact that I have two choices here when it comes to the foliage, all the leaves that you can see on there, because as you can see, there's a lot of them. I wasn't as diligent about pruning this year as I have been in years past, but I was thinking about removing them, removing a bunch more of the leaves. But this is the thought that's kind of been running around in my brain as I've been doing this, is that these leaves are not going to grow bigger. They're just going to basically maintain themselves at this point. They're all fully grown on these plants. And I will pull off all the suckers. So the suckers are the branches that come out in between a leaf and the main stem. So I will pull those off because the plant will put energy into growing those. But the whole idea behind pruning is that you want the plant to put energy into growing fruit and producing the fruit. But also the plants themselves, those leaves actually photosynthesize, which gives the plant energy. So I'm kind of wondering if at this stage of the game, if it's not really worth it going to the effort of pruning off all the extra foliage here. If there's anybody who is a more expert tomato grower than I am, I would love to hear from you if you would, at this point, if you would bother with the pruning. The other thing about pruning is when you prune early in the season, the plant still has a lot of oomph and get up and go, and so it can rebound from the shock of removing all those pruned leaves. Whereas this time of year, it has a little bit less energy because a lot of that energy is going into fruit production. So I'm not sure. I feel like the topping definitely needs to happen, but I think as of right now anyway, unless somebody tells me differently, I am going to follow my intuition on this and actually just leave the leaves on. One of the reasons that I do love pruning my plants is because you get to see all the beautiful tomatoes. Look at that. They're just gorgeous on this plant. You get to see them better without having all the foliage on here. But like I said, I'm just gonna leave it as is, but let's go along and top all these. Flowers way up at the top of this one. You know what I think I'm gonna do is just top right above that and leave that little one to go. We'll see if we end up with tomatoes on that at the end of the season. Oh my gosh, this one is almost to the top of the high tunnel. Holy moly. So now that that is all done, our tomatoes are topped and this side is pretty well pruned. I'm gonna have to get to the other side, but that's gonna wait till tonight when it's a little bit cooler in here. But right now we are going to pick some peppers. I have tons of peppers. Look at those beautiful banana peppers there. So we are going to pick some peppers and we are going to make some pickled peppers. So these ones are our sweet banana peppers. And I like mixing banana peppers with some of the hotter peppers because they're sweet. So it balances out that heat a little bit. So we're gonna pick a bunch of these. Theoretically, I could do the same thing with the peppers as I did with the tomatoes. I could go along and pull off the flowers that are on here because they are not going to have enough time to produce peppers. But I usually don't bother doing that. I don't know why I don't bother doing that. I just don't. These ones also have a way to go. What are these ones anyway? Where's my tag? I am going to pick some of our Hungarian black peppers here, which are very prolific. Now, these ones apparently have a similar heat to the jalapenos. Some people say they're a little bit hotter and some people say they're not as hot. So we're gonna have to check it out ourselves. But there are lots of them. I don't need to do that many pickled peppers this year because I have tons left from last year because I did so many last year. So how many of you have the Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers little rhyme in your head every time I say pickled peppers? I know I do. We have some golden cayenne peppers that are almost ripe, so that's exciting. Oh, we got a couple jalapenos here. And I can see a bunch more banana peppers over there. A whole bunch right there, and some more here. Nice little haul so far. These ones are another cayenne. I want to make Frank's hot sauce, or an imitation Frank's hot sauce, so I grew quite a few cayennes. Oh, we got some Hungarian hot wax over here. Oh, look at that beauty. That's a gorgeous sweet pepper. The peppers this year are kind of like the tomatoes over here in that we just don't have a ton of them. The ones that are down here, more the hot peppers, they're doing pretty well. But all of my sweet peppers that are along here have just tiny little fruits on them or no fruits at all, which is kind of a bummer. Oh, there's another one. This is just what happens with gardening. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. It's a good thing we have these gorgeous sunflowers to keep us feeling cheerful. All right, I think this little batch of peppers that we have here is the perfect amount for a small batch of pickled peppers. So let's head up to the house and make them. All right, friends, back up in the kitchen with our gorgeous peppers. Look at how beautiful these look. So all I'm going to do, could not be easier. We're going to cut these up into rings. You can choose to leave the seeds in if you want, or you can remove them. So rings just like that. And I'm going to do a mix here of sweet peppers and of spicy peppers. Most people do pickled peppers with jalapenos, or cowboy candy, they call it. But I like to do a mix because I don't like it too hot. If you are going to remove your seeds and the membrane, because the membrane part right here is actually where a lot of the heat is held. If you're going to remove that, I would recommend using, those are spicy. I would recommend using gloves. I'm not doing that, so I'm not worried about that today. Oh, look at these. So these are the Hungarian black peppers. They're green on the inside. Beautiful. When it comes to preserving, fresh is best. So when it comes to any type of pickling that you're doing, the fresher the vegetables you're using, the crispier that your pickle is going to be. But in the case of peppers, I do find that they can sit in the crisper in the fridge for a day or two, as long as you have some moisture in there. That part's really important. And be okay, because we're actually going to be cooking these in the syrup that we're going to make anyway. So they're going to be softened by that processing. Most of the recipes online talk about making your syrup with your seasonings and then adding your peppers to that. And I actually just throw everything in the pot and heat everything up at once, because I'm always looking to save on time, and that doesn't affect safety at all. So we're going to add for our seasonings into this, and you can omit the seasonings if you want. But we're going to add a little bit of celery seed. So for our, let's say 8 cups, we probably have around 8 cups. So I'm adding about 2 teaspoons of celery seed. I'm going to add some turmeric, and this is mostly for color, not for flavor. So around 2 teaspoons, tablespoon, somewhere in that range. And then I am going to add some apple cider vinegar and some plain vinegar. And this is going to, there's going to be liquid that's going to come out of these. So I'm only going to add just a little bit, let's say 2 cups, add around 2 cups or so to the amount of peppers that I have here. I'm going to add half as much sugar as I did vinegar. So I added 2 cups of vinegar. So I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar. And I'm going to get this over on the stove and start cooking it down. Now that these are ready, let me show you what they're going to look like. They're going to be shiny like that and a little bit translucent. We're going to load up our jars with our peppers. Now I'm going to crank my heat back up and reduce the syrup. Okay, our syrup is all ready to go, nice and thick. Sticky, so washing our rim really well. We're gonna lid it and then can these for 10 minutes in the steam canner or water bath canner. All right, friends. Okay, we are done. Don't those look beautiful? I am not going to need any more than that though, because I still have probably 40 jars down from last year. So that's great, but I'm glad I was able to show you. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye everyone.